I became familiar with André Leon Talley through Vogue magazine. He's like a black superhero.
They give a nod to the
But
Godfather.
you're giving us a futuristic James Brown moment on the shoulders.
He's the Nelson Mandela of couture, the Kofi Annan of what you got on.
His bombastic personality
Oh, this is a look.
gave people energy themselves and to take risks.
Why are you being so low-key?
When Andre tosses out all these different words, a lot of people think, oh my God, this guy is crazy.
People's heads went.
Hello, that was a clip from The Gospel According to Andre, a documentary about André Leon Talley, Christy, and Matt, and Ben. And Ben's going to tell us more about this film.
Yeah, so I'm going to need to remember what it was called. I saw it about an hour ago.
It's all fled your brain. It's a sieve.
So yeah, this is a documentary about the life of André Leon Talley. And for me, a documentary to matter and leave an emotional imprint has to do one of two things. It either has to tell you a compelling story that you did not know about, or it has to change your mind about something that you already had an impression of, right? Make you think totally differently about something you already knew. I didn't know any of this, so this was all. I didn't know who he was.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Because the fashion world is one of the worlds, and there are many worlds about which I am totally clueless.
You look very spiffy today. The pocket square was a nice touch on the day that we're talking about the Vogue magazine.
I didn't not think about that.
Isn't Tom Ford your buddy, by the way?
Yeah, and
You know
Tom's in the movie. Yeah, I don't know that buddy would be the right word, but
he's your stylist now, though. He told you which button to button.
We are acquainted, yeah, he did give me some tips, which I follow religiously.
There you go.
Because you don't. So this is the story of André Leon Talley, really from his upbringing, which is the backbone of the story, growing up in the segregated South in Durham, North Carolina, with a working class grandmother who took care of him. His parents essentially abandoned him, not essentially, they abandoned him with the grandmother and then took off back to Washington, D.C., I presume, where he was born. And his sort of growth as this large, dominant personality, a black guy in the segregated South, who then sort of worked his way to Brown University and then became an editor at Vogue and at Women's Wear Daily and an institution in the fashion world, in a world that did not embrace black men and did not embrace black people really in any way. So sort of broke barriers again and again and again.
Yeah, he blazed a trail. He had this really fascinating combination of like talent and timing, right? Because he thought for himself and he was ahead of his time in that regard, but he happened to be in the right place at the right time a lot of the time. So he was.
I think he put himself there.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, which I think is. I don't think that's a. I don't think that's a criticism. I think that's. He was like, no, this is where the interesting people are. Yeah. I'm interesting. I'm going to go where they are, and they are going to have a difficult time. Not noticing
ignoring me. No,
right.
But I feel like he goes to Brown and he happens to make friends with people at RISD, and they're all like doing creative things, and you can see how every place he went and every person he met helped shape him. Although he was clearly already singular, he had opportunities to like hone the persona he came to know. But like going to New York, he was fascinated by New York. He happened to go there in the 70s and be there for like the height of Studio 54, and he worked for Andy Warhol, and like, he put himself there. But it's almost like a Zelig-like way of being at like the absolute perfect place at every moment in time he can be.
There's a great moment talking to Fran Lebowitz, and she met him at an interview, and he said there were all these debutantes that came in to have his job, answer the phone. They wouldn't even answer the phone. They didn't even know how. And then here's this guy there, and she didn't understand his name. And she was like, is it André Lally? And he goes, it's André Leon Talley, as in Talleyrand. And she does that, and she bursts out laughing, and he's like, what? You know?
Did you know anything about this person before this movie?
I knew pretty much nothing, having only watched the trailer. And one of the things the movie does well is, and you talk about like him being at the right place at the right time, but I feel like the movie lets him talk about how much he was working and his tenacity and his just drive. And it wasn't that, oh, I'm just gonna do this thing. Like I would have kind of been interested to hear about how many other things had he been trying until that, right? I think a lot of it is being open to those opportunities where he's in the right place at the right time, but he's, how many opportunities did he follow that didn't pan out, right? Because you get the sense when he talks later about relationships and how hard he's worked his whole life, you do get the sense of, okay, so this is a guy who's been devoted to his dreams. And so anytime an opportunity would come his way, he would capitalize on it. And the movie also does a good job of showing kind of how his background in the church in Durham really affected who he was and built him into the person he was or is, in that, he talks about the fashion show that was the rest of the congregation in their Sunday best, right? And I really like that. But then the movie does some stuff that really bugged me. That, for instance, when he talks about discovering Vogue as a kid, like going to the library and discovering Vogue and this whole new world opening up to him. Well, if you do the math, that's probably what, maybe the 60s?
Early to mid 60s.
Right, early to mid 60s. And it looked like the pages, like I would have liked to, when they're showing the pages of Vogue, would have liked to have seen like the dates on those pages, because all the fashion in that looked like early 70s stuff. And I didn't get the sense that the pages that they were showing matched the time he was talking about.
That would be a rather silly mistake to make, since I'm sure Vogue is available.
Well, right.
And you see him go to the archives.
Right,
yeah.
Or at the very least, like, show us what dates those are from, right? Like, if you're gonna show us those, like, show us.
I'll tell you what, like, the thing that I didn't, if there was anything that I didn't, and I liked this, and I learned, I feel like, I like instantly followed him on Twitter, is that there was I thought a little bit of repetition of people saying some version of, man, he just blazed his own trail. Let me tell you, this guy just blazed, this guy blazed his own trail. And there was a lot of that right through to the end. Interspersed with sort of his growth in that moment, then there's this, sort of painful moment of his, when he starts talking about the particular type of racism that a guy like him faced, and Queen Kong, his nickname in Paris, and how he didn't sort of say anything about, and then there's a very poignant moment where he's clearly sort of fighting back tears. And then this inability to connect with anyone in a meaningful, romantic way, that there really has gone through his life, he said never being in love.
Right, because his work has been his true passion.
Yeah, or almost more so than work struck me as ambition. Everybody like drive. Like he would not focus on that, because you feel like if you're doing that, and if you go to dinner, and if you take a 3-day weekend away with somebody who you're in love with, what call are you going to miss? What opportunity are you going to miss?
I feel like there's a suggestion that perhaps he was involved somehow with Karl Lagerfeld. There's a suggestion of intimacy, but nothing that they specify.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I would say that maybe is deficient here. Kate Novack directed this, and she gets a lot of really personal access to him at his various homes, his apartment, his farm, and to a lot of his friends. It's very intimate, and it's not exactly a warts and all depiction of André Leon Talley. It's quite worshipful of him, and he's a fascinating guy,
super interesting guy,
and
fun to be around,
charismatic, and like just turn the camera on him and watch him in his milieu. And I think it's fascinating that he has been clearly a champion for a lot of fashion and a champion of certain people and designers, but he also isn't afraid to be critical, and people still, appreciate that balance that he's struck. He's not just a fanboy, to use a phrase we use around here a lot. He's quite honest when he needs to be, and is still adored.
When he needs to be, but then you see, having then gone and read about him, for instance, there's one of the things I read was about, there was an intervention that Oprah was involved in with some of his other friends about his weight, and that doesn't get, that hardly gets covered at all. Like, you see him in a weight loss place, and he's complaining about what he's eating, but that's about it.
He's been to Duke 7 times, to Duke Weight Loss Center, and but yeah, he wears caftans all the time, right? Because and he sort of turned that into a style choice, but it's a style choice driven by weight that apparently touched off when his grandmother died.
Oh, okay. Is that what?
Food turned into emotional eating, and because he was pretty lean, and he always wore, he was the 6'7" black Tom Wolfe. He looked, he wore nice suits
in the 70s. Yeah. Even at like the Met Gala, you see him in a very stylish, couture caftan. Yeah.
And when I love that when he's talking about Diana Vreeland, he still to this day calls her Mrs. Vreeland.
Yes.
You see how both his grandmother and Vreeland really affected who he became, both professionally and personally. So I thought that worked. We were talking about this to Katie Walsh last night. I'm like, I don't know that we still need to see stuff in a doc about the election.
Oh, right. There's a whole party where they watch for election results with Maureen Dowd.
Maureen Dowd, yeah.
Right. I think it just
she was
kind of happened as they were shooting it. I mean, The other thing is the movie does kind of answer the question, because I was thinking like, oh my God, how did a gay man survive like the late 70s, early 80s in New York and kind of survive?
Intact.
And you kind of get that answer.
I didn't even get, it dances around gayness. I mean, even though it's a presumption that all of us, given our preconceived, will have, and he says it at one point, sort of.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, but he was, you know, the one person the New York Times wrote about who he was said to have been in love with was a woman from back in Durham. So I don't even know that we're supposed to ask or care, but it is. I found that interesting. Since I was somewhat critical of the repetition, I thought of some of the same points from some of the people talking about him. He had a reputation for being difficult too, and that's not in it. We also didn't get inside his house at all. We got like one room.
On the porch.
He wouldn't let. Yeah, he didn't want people
Or the
in.
old house
and
that
that suggests to me like maybe there's hoarding going on
He's
or
hoarding
something
clothes.
interesting.
All
But
right.
real quick,
Right.
but I was moved by the Tamron Hall portion of her contribution. Just how much sort of he meant to her, and she has a way of sort of speaking about the Black experience and trying to find
other
a way,
thing- and I just-
in a way that I thought was
We gotta go.
touching.
What's your number?
I give it a 7.
6.8.
I was saying 8.4. So our
oh,
number
good.
is 7.4. It's 86%. It will be near you eventually. Go see it. Bye.